Hello everybody, my name is Jeremy Gilbertson. I'm the Managing Principal of EDI's Data Center Practice. Here to give you guys some updates on what we're doing, and especially want to focus in the higher education market. I want to introduce one of our most recent acquisitions, Dr. Tom Maier. Tom's here with us to chat a little bit about what's going on in the higher education market. And number one, we wanted to just kind of introduce Tom to you guys. He's working as our senior advisor for the higher education market. And Tom, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your history?
Well, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity. I have a sordid past, having started off many years ago as a faculty member, and actually in chemistry.
You won't hold that against you?
Well, some people do. Anyway, turns out that in the mid-'80s, as the technology boom started, I moved over into IT and have been there ever since. Had various roles in institutions, from infrastructure support and through a number of management areas up through the CIO. In fact, my last major assignment was the CIO for the University System of Georgia. Moved on from there to Georgia Tech to move on to work on some special projects, and retired actually from there to try some different things. And one of the things I'm working with EDI on is really helping understand the higher education market, its trends, directions, and providing advice and counsel with that particular market segment.
Yeah, the interesting thing of what Tom brings to the table is almost the pre-project consulting. Even before we get into the programmatic process of a data center or of a technology upgrade, there's a lot of administrative strategy, I guess, so to speak, that's involved, that we find Tom brings a significant amount of value in. So having said that, what are the major challenges that a CIO would be facing of a large higher ed institution?
Well, I know it's very trite to say, but it continues to be the case of trying to do more with less. Higher education funding situation is not good, especially in public higher education. Support has diminished, and so we really have to focus on ways to economize. I think you probably have all heard about the pressures on the cost of higher education, and certainly IT contributes to that. And so there's some great opportunities here to leverage the technology to be more efficient, to reduce costs, and in fact improve services. And so I think what we see a lot in higher education is that desire. There's a difference between desire and ability to execute, however. And so one of the things that certainly I've noticed in my career is that there is a need for individuals to come in and do a background analysis. As Jeremy mentioned, so much of the success of an engagement really is about how much you understand about the situation and how much you are able to diagnose the problem and then develop solutions. In higher education, the data center market, for better or for worse, is full of legacy situations. Simply, well, there was a basement over here, we didn't have anything in, so we threw it in there. Sure, the waste pipe is probably not going to leak on your main systems. And so there's a lot of, I think, catch-as-catch-can issues in terms of development of those centers. And again, it's been an expanding requirement. People want more, greater services, more bandwidth, more storage, more processing power. And so it's really not been, I would say, a strategically planned initiative in higher education. And so what we like to do is come in and say, look, let us take a look, analyze your situation, and really kind of bracket or come up with a way of describing the situation appropriately, then talk to you about the different ways in which you can develop strategies, not only for fixing the problems of today, but the many problems that are coming to us in the future with this, again, increased demand and reduced resources.
Well, it's interesting too that you mentioned kind of the idea of the matching the want to with the can do. Mm-hmm. And looking at your existing systems and figuring out what you have, but also figuring out the wherewithal to make a significant investment.
We have to be creative about solutions in this environment. It's not something you can simply, call up, your senior management and say, hey, I need all this money, when they're strapped with other pressures. So, in fact, I think the work we had done at Georgia Tech was a good example of where we looked at different alternatives, different models, especially looking at the private sector to play a role in this as well. And so it's really looking at new approaches to be able to fund the development of these facilities effectively, or to actually work with partners from the private sector to be able to satisfy these needs.
That's a very good point, and actually a good transition too. EDI's data center practice is very excited to be working with Cushman & Wakefield as the program manager for Georgia Tech's new high-performance compute facility Center for Modeling and Simulation. So that's a recent win for us that we're excited to dig into and help them through the programmatic feasibility and down the road development process. So having said that, let's talk about HPC a little bit and what that means, because that's a significant component of higher education data centers. And when you look at a data center, people tend to throw out the tier levels, tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, and HPC kind of throws a curveball to that whole framework in that you don't have to have this highly quadruple redundant tier 4 data center to execute these models and simulations. So let's talk about the approach there.
Yeah, that's always interesting when you mention the word HPC. Everyone thinks, oh well, you got to have the Cadillac. You've got to have, as Jeremy described it, one of these tier 4 plus type facilities. When in fact that's not the case at all. It really again comes back to analyzing the situation carefully and saying what are those things that are important. The big deal with HPC, of course, is power and cooling, and that sort of becomes the focal point. But beyond that, it's really understanding how to configure these types of systems that will be able to address the needs for the universities. And what's happened here is that at one time, HPC was the purview of very rarefied atmosphere, if you will. You went to Oak Ridge, you went to the National Supercomputing Centers. But that's all beginning to cascade and roll down to pretty much everyday work and research in particular. Right now, I was a researcher at one time, back in the old days. It's really a different world now. And part of it is because of what the technology can bring to the table, and HPC plays a very important role in that. If you're looking to do research these days, it's almost a requirement that you have some computational component. So what we're seeing now is this development, and institutions, again, we said, are struggling with just normal data center, also enterprise data center issues. Now you bring into the mix the need for this high-performance environment, which is, again, a little bit different animal. You're looking at different concepts. It's not about high availability. It's not about redundancy. It's about raw power. It's about large storage facilities. It's about data transfer. And so it's that difference that we have to focus on. And as we work with our clients, as Jeremy mentioned, it's really being able to help them understand the differences here. Excuse me.
Sure. And then enter the discussion, the buzzwords that everybody hears, cloud and outsource and infrastructure as a service and that sort of thing. And really what we're finding ourselves is, not just helping people design these new high-performance compute facilities, but to how do we create and validate a mixed portfolio of solutions to help out with high-performance compute, namely, what existing resources are on campus that you could use to stand up, initial instances, and what sort of external partners are available to kind of burst into, and then how to stand up flexible, modular, scalable infrastructure on your own. And lastly, how do you transition between all of those? So
it really is become a portfolio of issues. Again, at one time you put all your money into this very specialized, as a rarefied atmosphere focal point. Now, actually, if you went to that extreme, unfortunately, by the time you build some of these facilities and get them operational, they're already behind the curve. And so what we really look at is a spectrum of different solutions, starting from, an on-premise solution, leveraging existing resources, first of all. If you come into a higher education environment, and I mentioned the financial resource pressures, and say, well, we want to do HPC, we need 7 figures to get started, they just laugh at you. It's just not going to happen these days. So first, it is to begin to leverage what's available. And then it is to, again, create that environment. Part of the issue in higher education is to create the environment that will, in fact, bring dollars in. Research is very important but not just for the knowledge it creates, but it also is a fairly substantial amount of money that can flow into a budget from indirect cost and from direct salary support and so forth. So financially, it is an area that people are looking at to defray some of the costs of higher education. And so you really have to develop that. The point is then, we talk about the on-premise solution. What's really been remarkable, I think, in the last maybe 5 years, but certainly heating up, is, as Jeremy mentioned, the cloud issue. And people think of cloud in terms of storage, but what's really developed there is a whole cadre of resources now that are readily available that can be used by a campus to develop and promote high-performance computing. You don't have to have all your assets there locally. And what's really interesting now is figuring out the right mix, and that's one of the things that we try to do with our clients, is to say, what have you got? What can you leverage? What can you build? And then what can you buy? And we are seeing, again, a number of different combinations there. Certainly the Amazons out there, the Microsoft Azure, Oracle's making a strong play now in this market. And so we're literally beginning to see HPC not as just this specialized location on a campus, but now as a resource in the cloud that you can leverage, and in some cases very cost effectively.
Absolutely, and we're coming off a recent engagement with Arizona State University and helping them with exactly that, and diving into some of these external potential partnerships that they could dive into. So, any interesting takeaways on your end from that?
I think one of the things that I've been involved in over time are some national initiatives, and part of what we've done after we lost Internet 1, after they sold that, we came up with this thing called Internet 2. Again, it's an association of higher education institutions that came together to develop that. And there's been an extension of that, the service offerings. Again, initially it was about just big pipes and being able to transport data around effectively. Now there's a group there called, it's Internet 2 Net Plus, that is actually negotiating contracts that can be then available to any Internet 2 member to be able to purchase at reduced costs some of these cloud services. And so when we worked with the Arizona State folks, we leveraged some of those resources. In fact, one of the things we were able to do for them is actually arrange some grant funding from Microsoft to test out. One of the things that we saw in that engagement, I should mention, it is kind of a brave new world for a lot of folks. Moving into the cloud, first of all, is sometimes a little scary. Moving into the cloud with HPC can be a little bit daunting. And so one of the things that we advise, and in fact have been working with Arizona State on, are some proof of concepts. It's the idea that making this transition, in fact, from your focused on-premise solution to a cloud solution, takes some getting used to. And so one of the things that we're doing there is helping them make that kind of transition. What are the ways in which you continue to do things locally? Where are the things that belong local? Where are those things that you can ship to the cloud to be much more effective and more cost effective as well?
So you're saying, in a nutshell, HPC is more than just cramming an in-row cooler and a modular UPS into a corner closet.
I want my crack units here somewhere.
Right. So that's interesting. It's obviously more about strategy, Internet 2 Net Plus, about connecting the resources across the country, and how do you use these external guys, as it relates to that infrastructure. Tom, thanks for joining us, and hopefully that was really good information, letting you guys know what our data center practice is doing, especially on the higher ed side. Tom's going to be out at Supercompute, and our next installment will be some good nuggets and downloads from that session.
Sounds good.
So thanks.
Thank you.